Good afternoon.
Hope so.
Thank you. Lovely to see you all. Good. People are just materializing from their respective homes and shelters, no doubt. I hope Alina is among us.
Hello, dear Michael. Sorry, I've had a technical mix-up. So nice to meet you. So nice to
lovely to
welcome
meet
you today.
It's a privilege to be online.
It's a privilege for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you
so much, dear colleagues. So happy to greet you. Dear Michael, I would like to introduce Professor Virochenko Svetlana Andreevna to you, the head of the Foreign Languages School. She's here to greet you, and without her constant and encouraging support all through the preparation of this beautiful event, it would not be possible. Also, we've got heads of the departments here present, Professor Shevchenko Irina Semenievna, Professor Nefedova Olena Dmitrievna, and many, many others, Professor Morozova Irina Igorovna. So all of the leading departments are represented with their heads here. They're all here to greet you. Thank you so much for this honor.
I feel positively intimidated to be among so many senior colleagues at once. I will try not to disappoint, but it's lovely to speak to you all, and thank you so much for letting me online.
Our students are gathering, so with your kind permission, if you give me the permission, I would like to introduce you to our dear Karazin community, our students, our dean, our heads of the departments. So we have a very, very special guest today, dear friends. And as you may well know, the world is celebrating Shakespeare Days this week. And this event is honored by Vasil Karazin Kharkiv National University as well, who is deeply honored to welcome our dear guest, Professor Michael Dobson, Director of the Shakespeare Institute in Stratford-upon-Avon, Professor of Shakespeare Studies at the University of Birmingham. Our dear friend today, if I may, is to provide an online talk to Karazin students and primarily to the School of Foreign Languages. Michael Dobson has a continual and intellectual and personal interest in Ukraine, in Ukrainian culture, and in its current heroic resistance to tyranny. Professor Dobson has been an honorary member of the Ukrainian Shakespeare Theatre and Center based in Zaporizhia since 2011. And he's had great good fortune for parts of the country in 2018, in Lviv, in Ivano-Frankivsk, in Kiev, in Zaporizhia, while researching his unfinished book about Shakespeare in the repertoire of national theaters. He has been in constant touch with Ukrainian colleagues since the invasion, and he has welcomed many of them in his home. Professor Dobson has been the director of the Shakespeare Institute since 2011. He has taught at universities of London, Illinois, Harvard, Oxford. He is a co-director of Shakespeare Center in Nanjing, and today, I'm very happy to say that he is welcoming Karazin University community with the words of support, encouragement, and hopefully further cooperation. I'm especially honored to step down in favor of our dean with her words of greeting, who has helped since the very beginning of this project, who has pushed this project to the shape in which it is existing right now, and without whose kind help, I'm absolutely positive this event would not be possible. Svetlana Andreevna, thank you so much. I'm very happy to give you the floor. Thank you for your kind presence today and for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, dear Lina. Thank you, Michael. Dear colleagues, dear students, it's great honor for Karazin University and the Karazin community to have today's speaker, who is known for his work and for his love for English literature. Michael has written a lot about Shakespeare's plays and poems and has examined Shakespeare's writings, explored how they have stimulated the creativity of other people across time. And today's lecture is especially of high interest for students of School of Foreign Languages, as English literature and American literature is their major. And the theme of Shakespeare is one of the central in the content of the subject, and it's extremely valuable that our students can hear a lecture from a real expert. Dear Michael, I want to thank you for giving us such a splendid opportunity to listen to a lecture. It's especially important for all us during these harsh times, but having you as a speaker today, we feel great support from you, from your country, and actually from the whole world, and it gives us strength to go on, for students to study, for teachers to teach. Thank you so much again, and we are looking forward to hearing your lecture, a lecture to victory. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's a huge privilege to be here online. Good. Now, I hope it will be possible for me to share my screen so that I can show you pictures in a minute. But first, before I share my screen, just to set the scene, I thought I would do something which is just, I think, technically possible, a rather primitive technological thing, just to show you where I am physically, because I'm in my office at the Shakespeare Institute. All I'm going to do this afternoon is tell you a little about what the Shakespeare Institute does and what kind of work this specialist university department just devoted to Shakespeare does, and who we are. But let me show you where we are before I tell you who we are. We're currently in my office in Stratford. You may just be able to make out on that distant mantelpiece a Ukrainian flag in a mug given, which is a ceramic cup from the Shakespeare Center in Zaporizhia. And you won't be able to see it, but there's a very proud document up there, which is my diploma from the Higher School of the Ukrainian Academy, of which I'm an honorary member. Anyway, the Institute is housed in this nice big 18th century house, which used to belong to an Edwardian novelist called Marie Corelli. And it's right conveniently in the middle of Stratford. So what I'm now going to do very riskily is lean out of the window to show you where we are in the middle of Stratford. So if I just take this camera like this and stuff it out here, like that, there you can see we are directly opposite. There's a bus going past. We're directly opposite, very conveniently, an Elizabethan pub where Shakespeare probably drank beer. And if I turn the camera that way, you can see a little church tower. That's the Guild Chapel, which is at Stratford Guildhall, which is where Shakespeare went to grammar school. And just opposite that little tower was Shakespeare's big house, New Place, the very grand residence, the biggest private house in Stratford, which he bought for his family with all the money he made in the theatre in London. What you can't quite see, no, I can't reach far enough without falling out of the window. We're right next to Stratford District Council, which has a Ukrainian flag flying and has had a Ukrainian flag flying ever since the invasion. Anyway, let's come back inside where it's safe, or relatively safe. And I'll stick this camera back up here. Look at those lovely beams. It's a nice house, this. Right, here we go. I'm now going to share my screen like so. And I'm going to go there and hope this will move. Is that going to move? No, I can't seem to move on to the next slide. Oh, no, yes, I can. Right. Okay, here we are then. Stratford has a big celebration every year for Shakespeare's birthday. Ambassadors come from representing different countries. The whole town has a parade. every pupil in Shakespeare's old grammar school has to carry flowers to Shakespeare's grave. And the Shakespeare Institute has a banner, and we have a party in the procession. This is us, or some of us, last year. This year, this last weekend, it was a bit different because we were divided between a Shakespeare Institute banner and a Ukrainian banner, because we hosted two members of the Ukrainian Shakespeare Center, Natalia Torkut, who gave the speech, the toast to the immortal memory of William Shakespeare at the big official lunch, and her great colleague, Maya Habarchuk, who's a theatre historian from the University of Lviv, Ivan Franko National University in Lviv, with which this university, the University of Birmingham, is now twinned. So we had the great privilege of marching through the middle of Stratford behind a Ukrainian flag this year, with much encouragement shouted from the crowd. And Natalia made an absolutely wonderful speech. She's now an honorary fellow of the Shakespeare Institute. Here is the big hall that we use for lectures and for performances with me and Natalia. And she's given us this absolutely splendid stuffed cat in Ukrainian colors, which now sits permanently on the mantelpiece. There she is making her speech in the marquee. And she was able to meet some very influential people while she was here and talk about Ukraine with two members of parliament, including Nadim Zahawi, who until recently was Chancellor of the Exchequer and was finance minister for Boris Johnson. So it was a great diplomatic event with Ukraine very much center stage right through this. And there was a big article about it in the Guardian newspaper, another one in the Independent newspaper. Shakespeare's role in Ukraine and the importance of culture to keeping the spirit alive in time of war, very much foregrounded, and the importance of the support which the British government continues to give, and which I hope it will continue to increase over the next months. This is in the church where Shakespeare is buried. The Clopton Chapel, the chapel dedicated by Sir Hugh Clopton, whose old house Shakespeare bought, who was a person from Stratford who became Lord Mayor of London a generation before Shakespeare. His chapel is now dedicated to Ukraine. It has been since the invasion. As you see, there's a Ukrainian flag on a sort of altar, and Ukrainian refugees from around the Stratford area, and just the parishioners come specifically to pray for Ukraine in this, the most important chapel within the church. And here's the signed flag which Natalia and Maya have left at the Institute as a reminder of their visit. Not that we're going to forget, we're collaborating with them both. We've been arranging online symposia with them for a long time now, since well before the invasion. Anyway, to revert to more normal times, or at least to the things the Institute does anyway and elsewhere, there we are. That's how the building looks at the moment, with our banner out the front and the Ukrainian flag. The gentleman to the left wearing the turban, he's perhaps the most valuable object in the building. That's the only major Tudor portrait of a non-Christian. This man is Abdul El-Wahid ben Mohammed ben Masoud Anoun, who was the Moroccan ambassador to Elizabeth I. He was in London in 1599 and 1600, very visible. Shakespeare certainly knew all about him, probably saw him. That's before Shakespeare wrote Othello. And he was trying to negotiate an alliance between Elizabeth I and the Sultan of Morocco against the Spanish. The university spotted this portrait when it came up for auction in the 1950s and bought it. And normally it hangs in our hall But at the moment, it's on tour in America. It's been on loan to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. I went over with it in October, and I will be meeting up with it again in September in San Francisco before, where it's going on display and when it will then come back. So we have actually quite a nice art collection, not just that painting, but many others connected with Shakespeare. And we have an excellent library. On the right, you see our librarian, Karen Thompson. We have the archives of a number of actors. I'll talk about this later. As you can see from the label thing in the middle, underneath the picture of the building, we have a collaboration with the Royal Shakespeare Company. And again, I'll talk about that later on. And according to the university's propaganda department, we are heroes. Nobody calls us heroes. We don't deserve it. That's you. That's not us. But according to this poster that the university sticks up around the place, we are keeping Shakespeare alive, which makes us sound like kidnappers, it seems to me. It sounds like a threat as to what we might do to Shakespeare unless you send us money. But in any case, we do regard Shakespeare as very much alive. He's certainly very much alive in this building. Now, the building has an interesting history. It was the home of Marie Corelli, a very famous best-selling Edwardian novelist who was very into spiritualism and who was also very much involved in restoring Elizabethan buildings around Stratford. After her death, she was more or less forgotten, though her partner went on living here. And the building was sold and became, as you see from this old postcard, a building for the British Council. And it was while it belonged to the British Council in the late 1940s that it began hosting short courses about Shakespeare, run in collaboration with the theatre, and it became the home of an international Shakespeare conference and the home of a journal about Shakespeare called Shakespeare Survey. And all of those things were taken on by the University of Birmingham when the University of Birmingham bought this building in 1951 in order to set up the world's only university department just devoted to Shakespeare and Shakespeare's influence and Shakespeare's colleagues. So here are kind of three things I want to take you through. This is part of our garden. We've still got the lovely garden that Marie Corelli, the novelist, had. This structure is an 18th century folly. It was built in about 1769 for people to shelter in when it was raining in the garden, essentially. And Marie Corelli converted it into her study. So it's very beautifully set up for writing. My wife sometimes borrows it and writes in it particularly when she's writing about Stratford, which she does quite a lot because she's a specialist in literary tourism. But what I will talk about is the things we do, the kind of aspects of Shakespeare we study, and the kind of resources the Institute has gathered in order to let us do that, the things we teach, and then the things we do in collaboration with other organizations, both around the United Kingdom and around the world. So here we are. There are essentially 8 of us. We're a small department. That's me on the left. I do theatre history. We try to cover everything. Between us, we divide things up. We can all do, so obviously, we can all do undergraduate classes on Shakespeare on demand, and we're more than happy to do so. And we do, but we have our different specialisms. I'm essentially a theatre historian a historian of the performance of Shakespeare, both in Britain and elsewhere. Next to me here at the top is my deputy for research, Professor Tiffany Stern, who is a very eminent historian of the Elizabethan theatre and the Elizabethan printing trade in particular, a very great scholar, a fellow of the British Academy, and the general editor of the new Arden editions of Shakespeare. So she's one of the major textual scholars and editors and theatre historians of the Elizabethan. Next to her, seen here in her stunning Cambridge doctoral robes and this kind of Dutch masterpiece, Vermeer-looking hat, is my Deputy for Education, Abigail Rokerson-Woodall, who was formerly a professional actress, a very fine professional actress, but who became an academic. She spent her teenage years appearing on television with Catherine Zeta-Jones, and I think she lives on the repeat fees from those TV shows rather than on her academic salary. But she is our theatre practice person. Those parts of our courses that involve our students learning to perform and studying Shakespearean performance, Abigail deals with. She's also a specialist in education for the deaf, and has a whole research project on Shakespeare and the deaf and interpreting Shakespeare for the deaf, which is wonderful, and which she's doing in collaboration with the Royal Shakespeare Company's education department. Next to her, with the beard, trying to look like a Victorian sage, is Professor Ewan Fernie, who's an expert on philosophy, on religious history and Shakespeare, and also on Shakespeare in the social world, Shakespeare outside academia. He's currently running an enormous project in Birmingham called Everything to Everybody, which is setting out to remind the people of Birmingham that collectively they own the first great collection of Shakespeare books, the Birmingham Shakespeare Library. So Ewan is spending a lot of time in Birmingham at the moment, running events at the library, taking their copy of the first folio to every district of Birmingham. He's very, very interested in culture and industrialism, how high culture was disseminated in industrial cities and how it might be shared now. In the bottom line, the second line down, that's Dr. Erin Sullivan. She came to the Institute to do her master's degree on a Fulbright scholarship from America. She then did a doctorate in London about Shakespeare and the emotions, particularly melancholy. She's a historian of the emotions. And then she got hired at the Institute as a permanent faculty member. So she came back. And actually, her husband was also a master's student at the Institute and now teaches Shakespeare on the main campus in Birmingham. Erin also specializes in digital Shakespeare in online culture, Shakespeare in social media, and Shakespeare in virtual reality. She has a remarkable range. Next to her, we have Dr. Chris Lautaris, who has just published a big book about the first folio, which is terrific. He's our biography specialist. His book on the first folio is called The Intertwined Lives Behind the First Folio. So he's our specialist in Shakespeare's life, though he also specializes in medical history, Shakespeare and anatomy, Shakespeare sets the body. And he's from Cyprus. So we have, Tiffany's ancestors are from Lviv. She's Ukrainian Jewish. Ewan's from Scotland. Erin is from America. Chris is from Cyprus. Simon Smith, who is our musician, he does Shakespeare in music. He is from London, much less interestingly, but he's a wonderful musician. He's a very good viola player, as well as a great historian of Elizabethan and Jacobean theatre music. And next to him is Dr. Jessica Chiba, who is Japanese, bilingual Anglo-Japanese.
Лен, скажите, а можно открыть доступ, чтобы еще там подключались?
How true. She is our specialist in translation, Shakespeare and linguistic philosophy and Shakespeare in translation. And then down at the bottom, Robert Stagg is a specialist in versification and meter, and he's just with us temporarily on a fellowship. And Hes Bradley is just with us temporarily as a teaching fellow, though she's one of our graduates. She did her MA here. Okay, the collections. We have a beautiful library, purpose-built, hand-chosen since 1951. It always included, originally on microfiche, copies of every single surviving Elizabethan play. Now we have huge digital resources too. but it's very, very good for Shakespeare criticism because that's what it's designed for. You know, it's a highly specialized library, and it also includes a lot of primary materials. The Institute has always been at the cutting edge of the liaison between academia and the practical theatre. And, you know, it used to be that academic Shakespeare, scholarly Shakespeare, Shakespeare books were completely separate from performance Shakespeare, show business Shakespeare, and they were rather suspicious of each other. But for actors actually to know about Shakespeare and Shakespearean history, and for Shakespeare scholars to actually understand about performance is hugely enriching for both. And one of the big moments in that establishment of mutually beneficial relations between academia and the theatre came when the Shakespeare Institute made the woman in the middle, wearing the kind of tartan sash, an honorary fellow. In that picture, you see me, I'm on the right. In the middle is Professor Sir Stanley Wells, the most distinguished Shakespearean scholar alive, and I'm about to celebrate his 93rd birthday with him. And in the picture is his best friend, his long-standing friend, the godmother to his children, and he's the godfather to her children, Dame Judi Dench, who has been an affiliate of the Institute ever since the 1960s, when she was in Stratford playing Titania originally in Midsummer Night's Dream. And they've been very close friends ever since, and given each other a great deal of advice. On the left is another of our, at the top is another of our honorary fellows. During the pandemic, we were not allowed to have proper graduation ceremonies because of infection. So I arranged for there to be online graduation ceremonies, which would be attended, to kind of make it a bit special for our unfortunate students who were sitting alone in front of screens. I got the honorary fellows, some of the honorary fellows, to come and, congratulate the students. And that's Kenneth Branagh, Sir Kenneth Branagh, a very eminent Shakespearean actor and indeed filmmaker. We have a lot of his archive. We have lots of the storyboards and scripts and documents from the film versions he has made of Shakespeare plays. So he's very useful to us and a great friend and ally. And all these people, if our students are doing research about performances they've given or productions they were in, they will often just, say, well, put the student in touch with me. They can just ask me about it, about how it was. Bottom left, we have Dame Janet Suzman, probably the best Cleopatra I'm ever likely to see, who was here over the weekend and also spoke at the lunch and met our Ukrainian colleagues. We all went to the pub, and there's a big portrait of her on the stairs, and there she is with it. And here at the bottom in this office, cuddling my deputy Abigail, is Dame Harriet Walter, another very fine Shakespearean actress who has also played Cleopatra and Lady Macbeth and all the great female roles in Shakespeare, and some of the great male ones too. She's played Brutus and Prospero and Henry IV in recent years. So they give us archival materials. We have all of Dame Janet's papers, including her script and many other things from the great production of Othello, which she directed in South Africa under apartheid, which was a big breakthrough production treating, where at last a black actor, John Carney, got to play Othello opposite a white actress, which was technically illegal, unbelievably, at the time. This was in the late 1980s, and we've got all the documents about that. Yeah, and we have collections of their annotated scripts. The label closed until 2083. Sam West, who is pictured at the top, who played Hamlet here for the Royal Shakespeare Company in 2001, who's a very distinguished actor. Sam agreed to give us his archive. He's a director as well as an actor. He has annotated scripts. he takes compulsive notes. There's lots and lots of material. He said, well, there's some stuff here that's rather compromising that I think I should burn. I persuaded him not to, on the grounds that theatre historians of the future needed to know the whole story. Apparently, for some productions, he and his collaborator, Patrick Marber, made notes not only of the actors they wanted to have in their production, but of the actors they didn't want to have in the production, and why not. This was felt to be very compromising theatrical gossip, but I explained that under the terms of the library, we can put an embargo on it. We can preserve it, but not let anybody quote it until a fixed date. So that's theatrical gossip so toxic that nobody will be allowed to see it for another 60 years when Sam and I are safely out of the way. But you know, this is great material for studying the history of Shakespearean performance. And we also have the script that Laurence Olivier used during World War II when he was playing Hotspur, which includes his hand-sketched design for his makeup. We've got all the scripts from the actor Jasper Britton, all the material about the productions of Antony and Cleopatra directed by Janet. You know, it's a lovely collection. There's still much work to be done on it. As for the teaching programs, down here in Stratford, which is 30 miles from the rest of the university up in Birmingham, undergraduates are brought down to us for special excursions when they're taken to the theatre, and we teach them then, or we go up to Birmingham to talk to undergraduates. But here, based in Stratford, we have master's students and PhD students, doctoral apprentices and master's programs. There's the Masters in Shakespeare Studies, a whole advanced degree just about Shakespeare, which in its oldest form is designed essentially to train you to edit Shakespeare's plays, annotate them, understand them. But you can choose specific courses so that you have a more theatrical emphasis, and it can include practical work on how actors learn to stage Shakespeare. And there's a whole stream on education where we train people to be teachers of Shakespeare, whether in schools or universities, which includes spending a whole continuous week with the education department of the Royal Shakespeare Company and understanding the work they've done over the years. There's a very special program called Shakespeare and Creativity, where, as well as doing scholarly academic work, the students do creative projects, some of them performances in collaboration with the Royal Shakespeare Company, performed in the foyer of the theatre or in the garden of the theatre around Stratford, that are about taking Shakespeare out into the world. We do short courses called Spring into Shakespeare, which happens in the spring, and Fall in with Shakespeare, which happens in the autumn, which are designed to equip people who haven't done an undergraduate degree on Shakespeare, on theatre or on literature, to take the master's courses, or if people just want to take them. And we supervise doctoral students. You know, we have a quantity of them. In fact, nowadays, more than half of our students aren't physically in Stratford the whole time. You can do all of these courses by distance learning, you know, taking part in seminars by Zoom, watching the lectures online. You know, it can all be done. I mean, Shakespeare and Creativity can't be done that way because it involves actually performing in person. But the other courses, including the PhD, we do as distance learning as well. And something that's quite distinctive about what the Institute does is that there's a compulsory slot every Thursday afternoon when we have a guest speaker, and all of our students and faculty all get together in the hall, as you see in this picture, and somebody, sometimes one of us, that's Ewan, giving a talk, but invited major Shakespearean scholars who happen to be in Stratford or within reach of Stratford from all over the world speak, so that our students get to hear leading Shakespearean directors, and performers and scholars, as well as the ones that work in the building anyway. Okay, engagement around the world. I co-teach a course with the National University of Singapore, specifically about Shakespearean performances in Asia, Shakespearean translation in Asia, where Institute students and Singapore students watch video recordings of the same productions with surtitles and compare notes about them and interpret them. And that is co-run with the leading Shakespeare scholar of Asian Shakespeare, who is here in this nice picture, Li Lanyong, of the National University of Singapore, seen there at Wuzhen in China, where we had a board meeting of the Asian Shakespeare Intercultural Archive, which is the great digital resource. It's perfectly free. If you want to watch amazing Asian versions of Shakespeare, just look up Asian Shakespeare Intercultural Archive online, and there they all are. I'm afraid they're only surtitled in, you choose, you can have them surtitled in either Mandarin, Japanese, Korean, or English. They have not been surtitled in Ukrainian or Russian yet, but who knows, the day might come in some utopian future, but they're wonderful shows, and that's what our students study together on that particular course. We also have, as you've heard, a Shakespeare Center in Nanjing, run in collaboration with Nanjing University and with the big publishing house in Nanjing, Phoenix, which publishes Mandarin translations of Shakespeare. And that's our Vice Chancellor at its inauguration back in 2016. That's me at the statue of the tomb of, oh, what's his name? Liu something. Anyway, he was an astrologer who was executed for speaking truth to power. These things happen, especially in totalitarian societies like China. But you know, we have good, great colleagues there. That's Professor Zhong Song, my counterpart at the opening of the Shakespeare Center. And the Royal Shakespeare Company too takes part. This is when the artistic director of the RSC, Gregory Doran, and I were in Shanghai for the first Mandarin production of Shakespeare produced with the help of the RSC, which was a Henry V in Mandarin, which was a fabulous production. It was a great show, and there've been a few of these translations which we've helped with. We also have a research collaboration with Waseda University in Tokyo, which is an amazing place, not least because it has this building in the bottom right, the Tsubuchi Theatre Museum. The first person to translate the complete works of Shakespeare into Japanese was a professor at that university, Shoyo Tsubuchi, who was also a playwright and a producer of plays. And he stipulated that when he bequeathed the university his collection of props, costumes, scripts, posters, they should build a replica of an Elizabethan theatre to house it. And so in the middle of Tokyo, there's a concrete replica of an early 17th century London theatre, the Fortune, displaying this wonderful, it's the best theatre museum in the whole of Asia. So we run an event with them every year, alternating between having it here in Stratford and having it in Tokyo. And we work quite closely with Saitama Arts Theatre, which is Ninagawa's old theatre, and other groups in Japan. And this has helped make the Institute the best place in Europe to study Asian Shakespeare. So a lot of visiting scholars want to come to us from Asia, and scholars based in Britain who want to study aspects of Asian theatre tend to come to the Institute. I'm currently supervising PhDs about Shakespeare in Bangladesh and Shakespeare in Nepal. And we've had students before working on Shakespeare in Southeast Asia, right here in Stratford, which, you know, it's a mecca for international literary pilgrims anyway. And we have a collaboration now in Pakistan. That's Hena Karamat, who came over last year from Peshawar, meeting one of the theatre directors we work with, Iqbal Khan, who is an Anglo-Pakistani director who has directed Othello and Much Ado About Nothing for the Royal Shakespeare Company, and who also staged the opening ceremony for the Commonwealth Games this summer in Birmingham. He lives in Birmingham. He's very conveniently handy. So we are doing things in Pakistan through him too. We have very good relations with the oldest Shakespeare Society in the world, the oldest kind of professional scholarly Shakespeare Society in the world, the Deutsche Shakespeare Gesellschaft, which was founded in 1864, the 300th anniversary of Shakespeare's birth, before Germany even had a unified state. And that's their president, Claudia Olk, who usually comes to the Shakespeare Institute Christmas party. She's an extremely good dancer. I don't have any pictures of her dancing, sadly, because I'm usually dancing with her and I can't possibly take a picture at the same time. But we have had grant applications with them. We've had collaborative seminars with them, particularly in Weimar. Claudia is, we are currently working on an attempt to get Shakespearean performance listed by UNESCO, by the United Nations, as part of the world's intangible cultural heritage. So Claudia and I are mainly filling out forms together at the moment. But the Institute helped the Deutsche Shakespeare Gesellschaft set up the big Shakespeare Library in Munich in 1964, of which Claudia is also director. We also have a collaboration with the University of Verona. We teach a summer school in Verona about a different Shakespeare play every summer. This year it's Antony and Cleopatra, plays set around the Mediterranean. And we have a collaboration with the Institut pour Recherche sur la Renaissance, l'Âge classique et les Lumières, which is in Montpellier in France, and which was set up specifically as a kind of French equivalent of the Shakespeare Institute in the 1970s. That's Florence Marsh, who's the head of that, and that's Silvia Biliazzi, who is at the University of Verona. And of course, we collaborate with the Ukrainian Shakespeare Center. That's my certificate of membership of the Ukrainian Shakespeare Center, of which I'm extremely proud. It's up on the wall just over there. That's Maya Habarshuk and her daughter Sophia when I was in Lviv, visiting all the theaters in Lviv where Hamlet had ever been performed. Sophia, who acted as my interpreter then, is now based with the Ukrainian army in Britain. She's acting as a translator for Ukrainian soldiers who are being trained by the British Army. She was here just this last weekend. It was great to see her. And there's Natalia Torkut, the founder of the Ukrainian Shakespeare Center. And there's me in Kyiv in 2018, when that horrible monument was still there. As you see, people had already painted Slava Ukrainian and the Ukrainian flag on it. I was very fascinated and not entirely displeased when a friend sent me a picture of it being demolished recently. Horrible, great thing that it was. In Stratford, there are two other organizations dedicated to sharing Shakespeare with the world. One of them is the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, which maintains Shakespeare's birthplace, but also the house where Shakespeare's fiancée grew up, his wife, Anne Hathaway, Anne Shakespeare, and the house Shakespeare helped build for his daughter, Susanna, when she married the local doctor, John Hall, which is the one at the bottom. They have a lovely archive, which we use the whole time. They've got a lot of Elizabethan books and other papers. That's our own Dr. Ella Hawkins, who, a lot of our students wind up working with the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, and she's done a lot of work for them. She's a great specialist on Elizabethan stage costuming. And of course, we work with the Royal Shakespeare Company, the theatre company, which, and that's their headquarters just around the corner. You can't see it out of the window, but it's really not far away. This big complex of theatres right on the edge of the River Avon, in the heart of Stratford. So there's an aerial view of the theatre, which is the old 19th century theatre, then with the 20th century theatre built onto it. The 19th century theatre, now the Swan Auditorium. At the bottom, you can see our students doing things on the stage, having a symposium, rehearsing in the RSC Studio Theatre. And the picture in the middle is me with the emeritus artistic director of the Royal Shakespeare Company, Gregory Doran, who is currently visiting all the surviving copies of the first collected edition of Shakespeare, the first folio, published 400 years ago this year. And that's me showing Greg the copy that our university owns, which is a particularly lovely copy, I have to say. We're very lucky. It's worth about £10 million, but it's very nice regardless of the price tag. It's one of only 2 copies that includes a manuscript note saying what date it went to the binder to get the cover sewn on, which is a nice little touch. And we are involved in the all-party parliamentary group on Shakespeare. The Houses of Parliament now has a special kind of committee about Shakespeare, and the Shakespeare Institute does most of the organising. We've got an event coming up in June. We were very, very lucky that the inaugural meeting, which took place earlier this year, turned out to coincide with the visit of President Zelensky, when Mr. Zelensky addressed the Houses of Parliament. So we got to hear his speech. It was a great privilege. It was wonderful to be at the Houses of Parliament and every public building in London is flying the Ukrainian flag. And there we were talking about Shakespeare. And Mr. Zelensky, of course, had underlined the point about the importance of Shakespeare by quoting Shakespeare in his speech, as is his wont. This is part of what we do for the state, I suppose, as well as for our students. All the activities that we do with other groups around the world and with theatre companies who go to prisons, theatre companies who go to deprived areas, we call the Shakespeare Beyond Borders Alliance. And this is a picture of a theatre company who specialise in giving performances for people with autism, for deprived children, based on Shakespeare, called Flute Theatre, who are at this very moment in Sofia, in Bulgaria, performing for Ukrainian refugees in Bulgaria, and who've done a lot of fundraising for Ukraine, as well as the work they've done with Ukrainian expatriates, and they can't wait to be allowed to come to Ukraine itself. And there's Ewan with his Everything to Everybody project, sharing Shakespeare with the people of Birmingham, running events, showing their early editions of Shakespeare, talking about the history of Shakespeare as a popular writer that 19th century industrial populations wanted to have freely available in public libraries for everybody. And so there we are again. And before opening up for questions, I'll just finish on another nice picture of Maya and Natalia visiting at the weekend, because it was a great historic kind of event for us to have them here just for the weekend. And to be able to represent Ukraine as well as ourselves. So I'm going to switch the pictures off at that point. And here I am. Anybody with any questions whatsoever should throw them in.
Dear Michael, thank you for this incredible lecture, these beautiful words, amazing images, unforgettable feelings where, as we have seen, sadness meets optimism, optimistic face for the future. And I felt, and I'm sure everybody here, as if we were just a little bit transported into a different reality, into the pages of favorite plays in our beloved England. Thank you for the fact that you have literally and figuratively opened a window on the great literary, scholarly, and theatrical treasure trove of the Shakespeare Institute. And thank you very much for disclosing its enigma. The intermediality of the lecture was like a red thread. And I'm sure that our very appreciative and wonderful audience today has many questions that they would like to ask you. And I would like to share this wonderful time with you with them. So I'm giving all of them the floor. These are my teachers, amazing people representing our School of Foreign Languages, headed by our dean. Thank you so much. Dear
thank you,
colleagues, dear faculty, dear School of Foreign Languages, the floor is all yours, please. Please, Yevgen Kachanyuk, would you please?
Question.
take the
If
floor?
someone
Thank you so
wants
much.
to know more, start know about Shakespeare something, what would you recommend? Maybe some sonnet or
Well,
Well,
if you just want to start, I mean, for me, Shakespeare is a playwright primarily, a playwright poet, but a playwright, and it's seeing the plays in performance, which is when they're absolutely alive, happening in real time to you. That is the key thing. You know, I can't recommend a better introduction to Shakespeare than just going to one of the plays or seeing a good recording of one of the plays, if that's all that's available to you at the moment. Yeah, the sonnets are extraordinary, but they're very intricate. They're not easy poems. They don't kind of give themselves away. If you wanted to start reading one of Shakespeare's poems rather than a play, I would recommend Venus and Adonis, which was his most popular printed work in his own lifetime, and is wonderfully witty, charming, at once comic and compassionate piece of deluxe soft pornography. You know, it's very erotic, it's very funny, and it's very compassionate. I think it's a lovely poem. Yeah, if there's a good translation, or you know, if you are happy reading Elizabethan English, then have a look at Venus and Adonis. If you want to start on a poem rather than a play. But I would refer you to some of the great Ukrainian directors of Shakespeare, like Dmitry Bogomatsov in Ivano-Frankivsk and Lviv and Kiev. I saw his wonderful 12th Night in Kiev in 2018, and he's got a Coriolanus, which was recently performed this last weekend in Romania. You know, I mean, Ukraine has a wonderful tradition of Shakespearean performance, you know, going back to Les Kurbas and beyond.
thank you.
Thank you so much. Dear colleagues, would you like to join in? Professor Anishenko Natalia, would you please? Natalia Anatolyevna, you're most welcome.
Dear
Our
Professor,
Deputy Dean. Would you please? The floor is all
thank you.
yours.
Dear Professor Dobson, thank you so much for such an interesting lecture. And the object of my scientific research is the phenomenon of citation. And it's well known that in German linguistic culture, Shakespeare is the most quoted foreign language author. This is certainly due to a number of cultural historical facts. This German Shakespearean society with a long history, then theatrical performances and traditions of translation, the school curriculum. But perhaps, what is your opinion? Are there any other reasons why Germans do like Shakespeare so much?
Yeah, well, there's a tremendous history of German Shakespeare. One of the things they like about Shakespeare is the fact that he isn't French. You know, that 18th century romantic breaking away from French neoclassicism. Shakespeare offered a different precedent, a kind of popular theatre that didn't respect the rules that were imposed by French court culture. So that's one reason. English, although it's got a lot of Romance language in it, it's also a Germanic language. I mean, the rhythms are similar. Shakespeare works rather well in German. They've had a lot of fun translating Shakespeare. But Shakespeare's quotable anyway, because it's one of the things that Elizabethan theatre and Elizabethan audiences valued. People really did take commonplace books, notebooks with them to the theatre. And if they heard a good phrase in a play, they would scribble it down. You know, the takeaway little things you can quote are part of what was on offer, part of it's sort of partly built into the style of Shakespeare. So, you know, he's very quotable, even though he's very difficult to perform in extract. You know, you need, for it to be really dramatic, you need the context. You need to be where you are in the story. But just for verbal phrases, that's no problem at all. They sound great, just scribble them down. Just up the road, almost visible from my window, we have on display the earliest notebook in which somebody took notes from a copy of the first folio. Somebody went right through the contents of Shakespeare's collected plays in about 1630, just copying favorite phrases. They make no sense. They're taken completely out of context. They're slightly paraphrased, but that's what they wanted from the book. This was a kind of gold mine of images and comparisons and just little phrases, and they just copied them all out one after another. We're telling you nothing else about the plays at all. So Shakespeare is innately quotable. There you are. That's my answer.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Dear friends, who would like to be next? Would you please? Dear Irina Semenovna, Professor Shevchenko, would you please? The leading expert on Shakespeare studies at our university.
No, actually not the leading one. Thank you, Professor, for marvelous lecture. And my question is about publishing. I understand your center, your university publishes a lot. And is there a scholarly journal, maybe devoted to Shakespeare or to anything else? And if there is one, is it an open access?
Well, the university itself, my university, does not have its own press. Birmingham University doesn't actually print anything, you know, except its own degree ceremony handouts and so on. There is a peer-reviewed journal, which is based, its mailing address is the Institute, which was founded here in the 1940s when this was still the British Council building, called Shakespeare Survey. That's published by Cambridge University Press. And unfortunately, they make it available online, but only as part of a subscription package. You know, people have to pay for it. So, I mean, I could pirate you highlights, but I can't actually just give you access to it, much as I would like to do so. I mean, I think it would be a very good thing if it were an open access journal, but it isn't yet.
Thank you very much. We'll hope for the better.
Absolutely, absolutely. I will tell them that it was you in particular who asked for it, and they ought to realize the importance of that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Professor Nefyodova, Olena Dmitrovna, would you please?
Thank you very much for
Thank
this
you so much.
introduction to the Institute and this beautiful lecture that we have had today. And my question would be, our times are rather hard now in Ukraine. And so for us, very honestly, this is the time of political pamphlets, but Shakespeare is forever. You are keeping Shakespeare alive. Could you please suggest any work by Shakespeare, maybe a quote by Shakespeare for us to hand to?
Well, the one that Natalia was mentioning at the weekend, and I see why, is Henry V. You know, and she compares your president with Henry V, who in youth was a clown, but who on coming to responsibility has become a great and very eloquent war leader, and a great patriot. You know, Henry V is you know, once more under the breach, dear friends. I mean, it's full of great inspirational speeches designed to encourage people to defend their homeland. You know, we few, we happy few, we band of brothers. You know, it's Shakespeare's great war movie play. Laurence Olivier made a famous film version of it in the Second World War to inspire the troops who were reconquering Europe from the Nazis. That's a good movie, and I'm sure you can watch that online without having to pay anybody. It should be up on YouTube, if nowhere else.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. If you permit a little question from me, since you've mentioned, dear Michael, Sir Laurence Olivier in his film, produced, if I'm not mistaken, in 1944. If I may, I've seen this film, and I can say that there, Sir Laurence Olivier, first-time film director, made it look a little bit more cinematic than previous adaptations that were rather film stage productions previously. So in a sense that he treated film not as a documentary tool of the stage, but as a comprehensive art, consisting of camera work, blocking, soundtrack, and all those things. What are your personal preferences? Do you prefer cinematic adaptations of Shakespeare, or do you prefer documented stage adaptations? Thank you so much.
If I'm going to watch Shakespeare on screen, I would much rather it was made into a screen artwork. I mean, I find watching video recordings of productions I've seen very touching, but it's obviously not the same. What I would much rather be in the theatre with the actors telling me the story in real time, and have it live. But if I'm going to watch it in the movies, I would rather it was completely, as you say, Olivier was remarkable in the way, I mean, Henry V is like his Citizen Kane, he kind of discovers cinema, and he does that those very poignant shots where we get aerial views of Elizabethan London, which for the original audiences of that film would have reminded them of aerial views of modern London and bomb damage. And we're transported back to before London was bombed, before it was built, when there's the Globe Theatre and the river and so on, in that early movement when it goes from the performance into the movie. I think it's an amazing film. I'm not surprised that Kenneth Branagh hero worships Laurence Olivier the way he does, and has indeed played Laurence Olivier in a film and made his own version of Henry V, which sort of isn't as good as Laurence Olivier's, but was what he could do as his first film. I like Richard Longcrane's version of Richard III, which is the one that's set in a kind of fictional 1930s fascist Britain. That's a genuinely a film rather than just stage actors on a stage acting in front of a camera. And of course, Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet is genuinely a film, and a very exciting one.
Thank you so much. Most interesting. Thank you. Dear audience, would like to take the floor with your kind permission, of course. We've had such an amazing hour. Do we have more questions, dear friends? Please show your hands. We have another question from Yevgen Kachanuk. You're most welcome.
How joke, does student continue trying to be such successful like Shakespeare by drinking the same beer?
Yeah, it's always worth a try. Elizabethan theatres sold beer. They were pub theatres. Shakespeare, when he inherited the house in which he was born, he converted part of it into a pub. Shakespeare was a pub landlord as well as a theatre manager and a scriptwriter and an actor. The big theatre here in Stratford was built by the local brewers. They provided the money. I think drinking beer with Shakespeare is a very appropriate thing to do.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, dear friends. Do we have some questions for now? Maybe you would like to express your thanks, the words of gratitude to our dear lecturer. I have a little question, if you permit, my own. It was mostly related to avant-garde Shakespeare theatrical productions. And I just wanted to ask if you think that avant-garde or classical nature of Shakespeare theatrical production is mostly dependent on the theatrical tradition of the country. Because I know of one in our city of Kharkiv. It was Theater 19, and there was rather avant-garde Hamlet. Do you think that avant-garde productions give more freedom to the interpretation?
Absolutely, but then
thank you so much.
Shakespeare's scripts give more freedom to the interpretation. Hamlet is quite an avant-garde play. I mean, it's the plot gets completely sidetracked. The one actor takes over, the action keeps stopping while he just talks to the audience. It keeps making games out of the fact that we know we're watching a play. It's not at all surprising that Hamlet's script gets sculpted by individual performers and directors into all sorts of different fascinating shapes. Shakespeare's not a purist. I mean, he's a literary writer who is also a popular entertainer who will try anything. These scripts are gifts. You can use them in whatever way you like, and develop, and different theatrical traditions and different theatrical techniques will bring out different things and bring them alive in different ways. Shakespeare's a very experimental writer, and doing experimental things to Shakespeare seems like an appropriate thing to me. I wouldn't in any way want to restrict the huge range of productions based on Shakespeare or using Shakespeare that there are. I've seen some great avant-garde Shakespeares, and Les Kerbas in his time was one of them.
Thank you so much.
His Macbeth
Thank
was
you so much
amazing.
for your time, dear friends. I would like to express. Oh, Professor Matukhina, would you like to take the floor? I'm sorry to have overlooked Professor Julia Matukhina.
Wow.
Thank you
Please,
so much.
The floor is all yours, my dear colleague.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you for your brilliant lecture. And it's a huge privilege for us to be a part of Shakespeare Society, at least for this short period of time, but at least for an hour and a half. And what you've just mentioned in your lecture, if I've got it right, is literary tourism. Could you please explain in more detail how it works?
Oh, literary tourism, this is my wife's great expertise. She's written about it extensively. It describes the practice of where readers want to go to places that they know from books, whether those places are the houses of the writers of the books, or places described in books, places against which fictional events are set. And it's an important cultural phenomenon in many parts of the world. I mean, I'm thinking of the Bulgakov House in Kyiv, which is one of the greatest literary museums in the world, I think, and which my wife writes about extensively. But of course, the importance of the amenability of Shakespeare's plays to translation, the way in which they have provided material for different entertainers and actors and theatres all around the world, means that people have wanted to come to Stratford in the hopes of making a kind of pilgrimage to Shakespeare's grave. Stratford's unusual in that you can visit the house where Shakespeare was born and the place where he died. The church where he was christened is also the church where he is buried. If you want to pay homage to Shakespeare, or if you want to come to a town where people have been imagining and remembering Shakespeare ever since his lifetime, you come to Stratford and you will meet lots of other people who are interested in Shakespeare. It's a great literary tourist hub that way. And one of the odd things is that literary tourisms kind of rub off on each other. Alive at the same time as Shakespeare and dying at about the same time as Shakespeare were Miguel de Cervantes in Spain, and also Tianjianzhou in China. And Fuzhou, the town in China where Tianjianzhou was born and is buried, has kind of attached itself to Stratford. Just beyond the Shakespeare Institute garden, there is a Chinese pavilion donated to the town by the town of Fuzhou. There's a statue of Tianjianzhou donated to Stratford Town Hall. In Fuzhou itself, they are building replicas of houses from Stratford and replicas of buildings known to Miguel de Cervantes, so that Chinese literary pilgrims can go to Fuzhou and pay homage to Tianjianzhou and Cervantes and Shakespeare all at once, which, it's not very good for the tourist trade in Stratford, because we would rather that the Chinese came to Stratford and bought souvenirs here instead of in Fuzhou. But it's a very pretty pavilion.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this most interesting question and answer. Dear colleagues, maybe somebody else would like to take the floor. We have this precious time together with Professor Dobson. Dear Snezhana.
Yes, the master's cat wants to speak, I see.
Dear Snezhana, are you with us?
Mhm.
Would you please?
Yes. Thank you for this excellent and very interesting lecture. So my question is, what do you think about Shakespearean problem plays? I mean, the plays written by Shakespeare, which are characterized by their complex and ambiguous tone, which shifts violently between more straightforward comic material and dark psychological drama. So what do you think about them? And can you please recommend some for reading? Thank you.
Well, when Shakespeare's colleagues divided his plays up in the first collected edition, they just put them into 3 piles: comedies, histories, tragedies. Actually, each of Shakespeare's plays is all of those things. He doesn't really go in for dividing genres absolutely, which is one of the reasons the French had such a problem with Shakespeare until they discovered romanticism. All of Shakespeare's plays are problem plays. The comedies admit that people suffer and die. The tragedies admit that people also make jokes and survive. And you know, the comedy is largely about communities surviving. Tragedy is largely about individuals dying, but they both admit that both of those things happen. It just gets particularly extreme. You know, Shakespeare's particularly interested in underlining that point in plays like Measure for Measure, All's Well That Ends Well. And actually the play that is just on at the theatre at the moment here, Cymbeline, which has a comic ending of family reunions, which has battles between Britain and Rome, and which, as well as having a very happy and peaceful ending, includes one unfortunate character having his head cut off, and a wife waking up on a headless corpse and thinking it's her husband, which is a really hard scene to act and a hard scene to take in the theatre. So to some extent, I think just reading about Shakespeare and genre as a whole will, you know, help you approach those particular plays that happen to have been labeled problem plays in the 20th century, like Measure for Measure, All's Well That Ends Well. I have to say, I absolutely love All's Well That Ends Well. But that's partly because I saw a really exceptionally good production of it with Harriet Walter, who's become a great friend, as Helena, a terrific cast, and Peggy Ashcroft as the Countess of Roussillon was in. But I mean, that was when I was young and impressionable. I mean, of course, it went straight to my heart. It was a wonderful show. I was young and vulnerable, and it stays with me. I have a poster for it up on the wall. Yeah, so read anything on Shakespeare and genre, really. I mean, Northrop Frye is interesting on that stuff. And you know, C.L. Barber's old book on festive comedy still makes quite a lot of sense.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this brilliant answer.
Thank you so much, dear Michael. We've got Professor Irina Morozova, the head of English Philology Teaching Method Departments. She's with us today. It's a privilege. I would like to give the floor to our head. Would you please, Irina Igorevna, the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Is it on? Is it working?
Yeah.
Oh, hope it is. Well, it's not a question, actually. It's rather a thank you for, well, a very interesting, well, thank you for the window onto Stratford, window onto Britain, and of course for, can I say so, the window onto Shakespeare. Well, the way you found to teach in the 21st century, when like everything has been read, done, well, discussed, taught, just the way, well, can I say, an unusual and on the other hand, well, like a very inspiring way your institute has found to introduce Shakespeare to the world. Like we could see, well, students of different nations united by the genius, can I say so, the same part.
Sure.
No doubt. So, well, like, thank you very much for this lecture. And I think for both our students, as who knows, future teachers or interpreters anyway. So for our students and for us, well, teachers present here, while showing us the way we can introduce your experience into our practice here in Ukraine. So once again, thank you very much for coming to us, joining us, telling us about your experience.
It's a privilege to be here. You know, where, I mean, you are at the cutting edge of the struggle to keep civilization alive and keep the plural, generous, multiple voiced values of Shakespearean drama alive in the face of totalitarianism. I feel some compunction that in this talk today, I really only talked about us. I only talked about what the Institute does and didn't really talk much about what Shakespeare does. I hope I might get a chance to come back and actually talk about a Shakespeare play or two, or just something, something which won't purely sound like an advert for my university department. But thank you so much for being, you know, as I say, I'm very, very proud to be able to speak to you today.
Dear Michael, thank you so much for everything. Thank you for every moment of this fantastic meeting. I will forward all possible contacts to our dean, to our faculty, to our heads of the department to make this cooperation possible. And thank you very much for caring. I know how many people you hosted in your home and how many people, how many Ukrainian people have received your personal help. And I would like to express my gratitude for that. It's hard to speak. I know what you've done and how much you've done for people, not only as the Institute director, but as a person who helped Ukrainian people. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for answering my letter. Thank you for finding the time. Our School of Foreign Languages will be so happy to greet you anytime during the war and after the war. And all the context will be forwarded to Svetlana Andreevna. I will do that. Thank you so much.
I look forward very much to lecturing in Kharkiv in person as soon as it becomes possible. Meanwhile, call on me anytime. I would love to do this again.
Thank you for your time, dear colleagues. Thank you for yours. Thank you for this chance to be here today. I know how hard it might be for someone. I'm so grateful to my department to be so amazingly represented here today. Thank you for your questions, for your support. Irina Igorevna, thank you so much. Svetlana Andreevna, Olena Dmitrievna, thank you so much. Ludmila Vasilyevna, I know you're here. Thank you so much, Irina Semenyevna, for amazing questions and for supporting this project and this initiative. And I'm happy to say that we are going to have some of our future lecturers here with us. So if dear Mary Jo hears me, I would like to welcome you today as well. Our lecture is going to be scheduled around the end of May and the beginning of June. Thank you so much, dear guests. Thank you for making it possible. Pani Victoria, thank you and your fantastic Public Relations Center of Vasil Karazin Kharkiv National University. Dear Michael, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for this meeting. Thank you for making it possible.
Yes. Slava Ukraine.
Героям слава. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you
Have
so
a
very
good
much.
day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, dear friends. Thank you, Pani Victoria. I think we have almost done. We have finished. Tatiana Yurievna, thank you so much for being with us today.